Well, in general, I mean, like Blackmagic Design is really a company run by Grant Petty and I guess his business partners. But it's like the rationale behind it, I think, is very much to do with what he wants to try. And I mean, he's crazy in a good way. That he's just like very, very passionate about doing stuff that rattles the industry in a way, and has always been like that.
What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD newsroom with Mino Leitner and Johnny Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome everybody to CineD Focus Check podcast, episode 51. We're just closing into the first year of this podcast.
Yeah.
What do you say, Johnny?
On 51, the time for 100 is very short. You think it will move faster?
It depends what's happening. Yeah.
Well, it depends. If it's a weekly podcast, I guess it's going to take the same time.
Yeah, almost. Actually, we're just ahead of BSC, also just ahead of CP+, which you're going to go to in Japan. So it's not been a huge amount of news in the last few weeks because usually companies are holding back for those trade shows. So curious what we will see in the next 2-3 weeks coming out. But I think we have a lot to talk about still, especially also, let's get started with some feedback for last week's episode. I'm just going to do a little bit of a summary of what we're going to talk about today. So we'll talk about a lot of the feedback we got for last week's episode, which was about the Ursa, what is it called? Ursa Cine 12K LF, which is now offered in a body-only version for around $7,000. We tried to find out what is the actual difference between that and the $15,000 version, which basically includes other bits and pieces, but we were not able to identify enough in a sense that if you calculate everything together, we're around $10,000. So yeah. So anyway,
at least we have a bit of more news from Blackmagic themselves.
We got some feedback from them. Right. We also got a lot of comments from you guys, some of which we're going to go through, which are interesting too, and they all relate either to the Ursa or, of course, also the Alexa 35 body-only model, which is priced differently. So we'll talk about that. We'll move on to a poll that we ran actually about that same subject. That would you buy a budget camera from ARRI even if it would offer lower specs than the competition? I think we got some very interesting results. Good idea for that poll, Johnny. Then we'll talk about new Angelbird cards, CFexpress Type B cards with up to 4 terabytes of capacity, which is insane, and what that means. Then also new Tokina Cinema Vista-C Cine Primes that were released. We'll talk about REDCINE-X Pro beta version that now supports Nikon NRAW, which is, I think, the first significant connection between Nikon and Red since they took over Red. And what that means. We'll talk about a bridge camera, which I think, or actually, is it a compact camera? How would you call this? It's not a bridge
compact bridge camera.
It's almost a unicorn now. Those cameras, the new Nikon COOLPIX P1100 with a 24 to what is it equivalent 1000 or something 3000 millimeter equivalent lens, so insane, tiny sensor, but we'll talk about that. Also new OM system OM3 camera, which is a micro four thirds camera competing directly with the Panasonic GH7, I would say, more or less.
Can I do this with my head?
Well, it is trying to compete, but yeah,
not so sure. The only competing is the price point, but other than that,
let's talk about it when we talk about it. We'll talk about the Atomos Ninja phone, which halved its price to $200. We'll mention an opinion article by Omri on RAW video if it's finally gone mainstream in 2024-25. We'll talk about a update to the RØDECaster video, their video switcher, which adds some automation features and some stuff which is still missing for us, which we would need in order to replace our Atom mini setup combined with a RØDECaster Pro. So, but yeah, we'll talk about that. And We'll mention the Camera Rentals NYC CinePower Calculator tool, a free tool to plan battery consumption, which is quite interesting, I have to say. And then we have a few bits and pieces on interviews that our friend Graham did about prioritizing safety on set, a video interview with Richard Jones, the father and founder of Sarah Jones, who was tragically killed on set about 10 years ago now already. Can you believe it? It's 10 years. He founded a non-profit focusing really on enhancing safety on set. We'll also talk about another interview he did, which is disability and stuttering representation and entertainment. An interview with Marc Winski on HBO Max's The Penguin. And basically this interview talks about how difficult it is to represent disability in film accurately when you have actors that don't have the same disability. So it's all about inclusion. And last but not least, we'll mention a nice educational article about harmony and tension in symmetrical shots in movies and TV examples, how to achieve those, what they mean, what they kind of convey. A nice article by Masha. But let's get started with the feedback from last week's episode. So we did reach out to Blackmagic Design. Unfortunately, we didn't get the reply in time for last week's episode, but we got it right after. And basically, we had a few questions about the media module and how not having that media module in the body-only version of the Ursa Cine 12K LF would affect the ability to record high frame rates, for example, or high resolution, like full resolution.
Or in other words, basically, if using the CFexpress cards model will affect in any way the performance of the camera.
Yeah.
And the answer is?
The answer is no, we don't limit formats available for CFexpress cards on our Blackmagic media module CF. The speed of the card will be the limiting factor. That's why we did the M2 media module, which will sustain over 5 gigabytes per second. So then there are no limits caused by the media there. But if you want more common CFexpress cards and you don't want to use the 10 gigabit Ethernet and the dock, then you can use CFexpress, which are slower but more common. So
first of all, for the record, I'm not upset with any of your models.
He mentioned
dear people
Johnny is upset about the media model.
No, I'm not upset at all. It's your stuff. We are just reporting it, and if it's work for us, we are happy. So I'm not upset about it.
But you
anything.
can't be, there's no, he's saying no reason to be upset at all because you can just use the CFexpress Type B card.
Which makes me much more happy for sure. Never upset, but happy because this is a kind of more common and it's easy to deal with the actual footage right after.
Yeah, media management.
Exactly. Media management. Doesn't matter if you are a single operator or on set. This is really good, and it's good to know that there are no limitations. I think the only thing which is still left open with the answer that we got from Blackmagic Design is if that model, the CFexpress model, is supporting the version 4 cards. I mean, it's
supporting the cards, but you mean the full speed?
That's right. I mean, we know that it is. They tried some of the version 4 CFexpress cards.
Yeah.
But
should I read the rest? Or?
You please do. I'm just saying that we're still not so sure if the camera itself supports the full speed of those cards.
Well, he wrote, we have tested some Type 4 cards and they also perform well, but not significantly better. Some have not been officially announced yet, so we will wait to add them to our list. Actually, one has been announced in the meantime, so we'll mention it afterwards. But yeah, so but let me just go through the rest. So basically, they have certified a bunch of cards, and those cards are listed on their support site as certified for the Ursa Cine 12K. And he says generally the lower data rate list on their site is the 12K OpenGate 45 frames per second at 8:1. They are the ones that have passed at this rate, which is around 840 megabytes per second. And then there's a shorter list that also passed for that format, but also for 12K OpenGate 3:1 at 24 frames per second, like 24p. And they will sustain around 1.2 gigabytes per second to a single card. So basically, yes, it makes sense to use the latest and fastest cards, apparently. Now, of course, I mean, we know from Angelbird, from our interview with Angelbird, I think at IBC, that actually at that time there were no cameras in the market, that's what you're referring to, that are actually supporting the potential speeds of CFexpress Type 4. And we still don't know. I mean, that's maybe one more question that we have to ask Blackmagic, if actually they will support that full speed, because it's not only the card, it's also the, I guess, firmware and everything.
Of course, it's not only the card. The card will always be, the speed of the card will always be limited by the hardware.
Yeah. So we don't know if the camera hardware is actually, but he mentioned that they are performing well, but not significantly better. So the question is the camera actually supporting it? So they actually have a tool on the website, a data rate and calculator on their front page, about halfway down. And you can just find out frame rates and resolutions you can achieve with those cards, which is helpful, of course.
We can put the link, I guess. No?
Yeah, people can just check it out on the website if you are considering buying this camera and you're not sure whether you use the medium module or not, and if you will be fine with the CFexpress Type B card. Go check it out. Do your math. To me, it seems like you're only in trouble if you need, like open gates with low compression and basically super high frame rates, which I guess many people could avoid.
Well, another thing from this email that we got, where they are supporting dual card recording, which doubles the data rate provided if you have two cards of the equal speed. This is also, I think, triggers some questions from our end. Just to elaborate a bit more, what does it mean? I mean, that means if the camera is kind of on a sequence base, literally split. I don't think it's splitting. I think it's dual card recording. It's the same as with a Sony camera, where it's just recording the same content on both cards simultaneously. Okay, I mean, this is something. It's not splitting between the cards. I don't know, because obviously it doubles the data rate. So I just wonder because on a single card, obviously you can't reach a certain data rate. So I really wonder if it does this kind of split.
Well, I guess it has two buses for each slot, the same bus which can sustain the same data rate. But when he says, I mean, it's not split recording in a sense that I know what you mean. But you mean like some older cameras that did this just in order to split for example, for a DNG RAW and so on.
For example,
I think it's the same on both. It's basically an instant backup.
We will try to clarify this also, just to make sure.
I think it's quite clear. But okay, good. Let's go to some of the feedback from last week's episode. Also, there's some very controversial comments, I would say. I mean, in terms of people have very different opinions about this. We have some people who are saying like Bounce, in his opinion, who's a very frequent commenter on CineD, the Cine 12K LF, the Ursa Cine 12K LF is a camera without a market. The layout of the camera combined with the size and weight makes this camera essentially only usable by a crew. The initial price tag was out of reach for many solo operators. And those with a budget will almost prefer to shoot with something more well-known in the industry, I agree, such as ARRI or Venice. Worse still, for those solo operators that could afford it, it would be hard to justify as it would necessitate the need for a crew.
For some extent, I have to agree with Bounce.
Absolutely.
I worked with the camera, I tested it. It's a very, very heavy tool. I mean, for a single person to run, of course, and probably it's simply not meant to be for a single person. But again, I want to separate between the quality of the images and what it does and usability. So I think Bounce is really, he's right about this is not a camera for a single person.
But I think he also puts out, like, if Blackmagic would have put this sensor in something more compact, they might have had an interesting proposition. And I think this is something we've seen. Well, we've seen this several times with Blackmagic design, where they are bringing down that sensor into smaller body forms. So and we know, for example, that the Pixies is meant as a platform. So everybody's hoping for a higher spec sensor at some point.
New sensor.
New sensor, something better in a similar form factor or the same form factor. So let's hope we will see this down the line.
I never know if Blackmagic Design first want to cover expenses in the sense of cover the research and development of a camera, or already running to the next best thing, and this is actually because we don't have any data how well or not the 12K LF cinema camera is actually being sold. Yeah, we just know that suddenly it's half the price.
Well, in general, I mean, like Blackmagic Design is really a company run by Grant Petty and I guess his business partners. But it's like the rationale behind it, I think, is very much to do with what he wants to try. And I mean, he's crazy in a good way. That he's just like very, very passionate about doing stuff that rattles the industry in a way, and has always been like that. And I'm thinking almost as if it's an experiment, like just to see how will people react to a camera like this that is that capable. Probably not even having done too much research on what is the market potential, hoping of course that it will gain ground in the mass, like in the high end. But in reality, like you said, I mean, they are probably, now the word is out that the sensor is really good. We've done the tests. We found out, like many others, that it's very, very capable. And that, like if they come out with a smaller version of that camera, people will already know, oh my God, it's the same sensor. And now it's probably the time to get a camera like that.
I don't know. I think it's a bit too expensive to run experiments like this. But again, we trust what they do in the sense of they bring tools that are quite innovative. And let's see what's next.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And a lot of people agree actually with that comment. However, William Young, also another frequent commenter to our site, is saying there isn't a market. By this argument, there isn't a market for ARRI or RED either. This camera offers the most bang for one's production's buck in any current options. Is it designed for solo operators? No. But given the majority of real movie productions require a team due to the way the industry works, the argument that it doesn't have a market seems ill-founded. Yes, if one isn't doing a true targeted industry production, then there are arguments to be made that this camera isn't the right camera. But to say that this is a camera without a market shows a level of ignorance. If this comment had been directed at the first Ursa camera, I would have agreed with this comment far more than today, because it was, if you remember the original Ursa, I think everybody, like Blackmagic, almost wants us to forget it. It's huge. I mean, there's a reason why they call actually almost every Ursa up until the Cine was called Ursa Mini, because it was simply a smaller version, which was still not very small, of that gigantic original Ursa that really didn't find a market at all. And I guess that, by the way, was also that kind of like, like tipping the toe into a camera market, getting a lot of pushback for like, are you insane making a camera which basically has an iPad built in terms of like screen size. And that was much bigger than this one. So anyway, that camera was massive and showed a lack of understanding of the market. However, that was 11 years ago, and Blackmagic's cameras have more than proven themselves to a significant portion of the target industry as a B camera. While many of the Ursa Minis could function as A cameras, they weren't as feature robust as other A camera options for higher budget films. This is the first real robust A camera option that they have offered. While some of the things mentioned will impact the industry, only time will tell if these factors harm or help this camera. It's actually a good point. I think we know of a lot of high budget productions that used Blackmagic cameras as crash cams, B cameras. So maybe there is almost like a market that we're not really aware of high-end operators and crews that have gotten used to Blackmagic cameras as those crash and B cameras, and now seeing this, like with budgets under pressure everywhere, they might consider it simply because they've already been familiarized with it.
As long as the ego is not involved, I really hope that those DPs will try the camera. It's very nice. It produced beautiful images. I think both of us and many others love the color science. Comes out from Blackmagic Design, and they're very consistent and they are very determined. I mean, the matter of truth is that they keep coming up with tools like this, and even if sometimes they miss their target in terms of who are those tools for, they still do a good job. And let's see. Do you have any other comments that you want to share here?
Yeah, I mean, there's some on the YouTube video, many of which also relate to the RE camera. I mean, it was all a little bit combined, right?
Yeah, that's right. The topic was how to sell the same camera at a reduced price, basically.
Exactly. And there's some interesting comments that I want to highlight. Where one from Robin Girth, he writes, or he or she writes that I believe RE will eventually transition into an all rental model. Interesting. Catering primarily to highly specialized boutique productions. The shift aligns with trends we've seen already in the music industry. In the past, professional recording required massive studios filled with complex high-end equipment operated by engineers with highly specialized skills. However, advancements in technology have completely transformed that landscape, and today it's possible to produce Grammy-winning studio-quality music using nothing more than an iPad or a smartphone. A similar transformation is unfolding in the film industry. Once high-budget productions relied exclusively on proprietary top-tier camera systems that were both expensive and difficult to operate, now affordable digital cameras and advanced software allow indie filmmakers to achieve results that rival Hollywood-level productions. As technology continues to advance, it's likely that RE, known for its high-end cameras, will no longer focus on direct ownership models for most users. Instead, it will position itself as a premium rental service reserved for productions that require the absolute highest standards of image quality and reliability. It's interesting because, of course, I mean, RE actually is the only camera company that has a division which is rental, right? I mean, it's like they own RE Rental, of course, whereas the other camera manufacturers, basically, their entire business is based on selling cameras.
Yeah, this is a very interesting comment.
Yeah.
But I think it's also connected to the latest price drop, meaning whom are they offering body only, like with some basic specifications, to the end user or to rental houses? We talked about it. I think 2 weeks before, about this type of model of enhancing the camera with subscription, like weekly, daily, monthly, yearly, whatever. But it's very interesting, and I think some of the stuff we're talking now today, it will be very interesting to revise those a year from now and see what happened to RE, if they really moved more into the rental or only rental.
But you see, I mean, with other comments, and they're right? I mean, Simon Sky comments that he thinks that RE will rely on different value streams in the future, like virtual productions. And it's true. I mean, we've seen them. They opened a huge virtual production studio in London a couple of years ago, and they are really heavily investing in services in general, which, of course, is a smart way of doing stuff. Basically, like, do the whole ecosystem, because then by that they can also, don't forget, also have their lighting division, and they
don't forget the competition. Of course they have lighting division, but I'm just saying the competition in the lighting and in the camera industry is just getting tougher by the day. So let's see.
But they are. I mean, they're quite dominant on the high end premium market with lighting still. Although, of course, there's a bit of pressure, but, like if you look at the RE Max lights and the big sky panels are getting some competitions now. But, I mean, they are very broad in terms, like even the lenses and everything they have. It's almost like you can go to them. I shoot a movie, you can get everything from them. And especially, of course, that makes sense if it's RE Rental. It's like, like you don't generally own these things. And I think, I mean, it's a private company, so we don't know exactly where the money comes from. Of course, we can't see, annual results that are very detailed anyway. But I'm assuming that actually most of the money actually comes probably from renting stuff in general, or services and rent and all that. So that's it. They're set up in a different way. I mean, we had a comment actually. Somebody called me out for saying that my argument that RE being a filmmaker first comment is silly to a point, because it doesn't really matter what the companies do if divisions inside their companies are already focused just as much as an indie cinema company would be. If I don't see it this way, like me, then Red being bought by Nikon would be a huge problem, wouldn't it? Because now Red is now part of a company that isn't focused on filmmaking, right? You see how this logic doesn't make sense. It's like saying that Sony doesn't care about the PlayStation as much as Nintendo cares about the Switch, because Sony sells other things and Nintendo doesn't. Well, I still stick to what I said, because I absolutely think that's true. If your main business is not selling cameras, you will not care as much about selling cameras, right? As RE does, or in general about filmmaking. I mean, if the majority of Sony's money comes from smartphone sensors selling to other brands or medical division or whatever, absolutely. I mean, they would not be as, like if, especially for publicly listed companies that really have to deliver results every quarter, the shareholders would question a camera division if it's not profitable. And of course, as a private company, first they can act differently. They can play the long game more because they don't have to look at those immediate shareholder. I mean, they also have shareholders,
but there's money. That's
ARRI is now 100% owned by one family since 12, 13 years ago.
I'm just saying, of course, if there is money, you can play the long game. But otherwise, if you are dependent on investors and you are listed in the stock exchange,
exactly, that's what I'm saying. It's like, so for sure. I mean, there would be a lot of pressure for them to change the tactics, I think. Whereas it's not. I mean, it's apples and oranges. Basically, I'm saying you can't compare every company to the other one because they are very different. So. A lot of good comments here in general about the whole thing. Also, more comments about the diversification of ARRI. They also are in medical, by the way. There was some interesting stuff. One more that I want to highlight is basically that. Jonte Danielson commented, "For most of my corporate shoots, we typically work within a budget that allows for renting an ARRI camera and lenses when needed. While not every project requires high-end equipment, the rental cost is rarely the biggest expense. Crew, post-production, and script development take up much larger portion of the budget. Looking at local, and that's the interesting part, looking at local rental prices, I can get an ARRI Alexa Mini for around 550 euros per day, while a Sony FX6 costs me around 350. That's interesting.
Can be also with the rental houses.
Might be a local thing, but I mean, that's only a 200 euro difference, which in most cases makes the Alexa Mini the obvious choice, unless it's an ultra low budget project or I specifically need the lower weight of the FX6. That's interesting, but it really depends. I don't have local rental rates on my radar, but I know that it's very typical if you rent a camera for a long period of time. Of course, you get a very low rate, especially for feature films. If you just factor it down, and there's a limit to how much even cheap cameras can be discounted, because at some point it won't make sense to rent it anymore. You would just buy it. So a lot of good comments here. Head over to the YouTube video specifically of last week's episode to get a lot of the feedback. So. Yeah, we can see this is an ongoing discussion. We see that there is a movement in the market, and that prices are under pressure. And I still think that the Ursa Mini 12K LF will find its market. I think it's like you said, let's see in a year from now where we stand with this. I almost think that at some point they will release a model that has the same sensor in a smaller body. I
don't want to predict, but yeah.
We'll be back after this message from our sponsor.
1 Minute Tips by Fujifilm and CineD. Something dawned on me the other day while speaking with an editor. It seems that a very common editing tool is going unused. Let me show you. We will show this both in DaVinci Resolve and Premiere, so make sure to follow the video. In Resolve, it is called the Trim Edit tool, and it allows you to change edit timing while dynamically moving the clips around the timeline instead of you having to adjust their spacing and timing manually. When I select the Trim Edit tool, I can hover over and edit directly to move the point without changing the rest of the timeline. I can drag one clip to adjust its edit point while the rest of the timeline moves to maintain the timing, or I can drag within a clip to adjust the clip's in and out points without changing its length or the rest of the timeline. Premiere breaks this function out into several tools, but all have the same result: the Rolling Edit tool for moving the edit point between clips, Ripple Edit for adjusting the individual in and out points, and the Slip tool for using within the clip. Here's to becoming a better and more efficient editor. 1 Minute Tips. Until next time.
And now back to the show. Good. Let's. You want to talk about this poll?
Polls are always fun. It's fun because first of all, together with my colleague Florian, we came up with the question. We always try to find things that might be interesting, and of course, since we dealt with like Magic Design and ARRI, it was really interesting for us to know if people will actually buy an ARRI camera if it offers lower specs, more than the competition, and we know that some of the cameras today are really, really good, but still you might have the look that everybody is looking for. So we actually gave 3 options to answer. Let me just get quickly the options here. 1 second, please. Yeah. So we had either, I would buy this camera in a heartbeat. The other option was, if I get an ARRI look, I'm fine with the low resolution of frame rates. And then, of course, the last one is, why should I buy a camera that can do less than the competition? So we had like 785 people answering the poll, and the majority shows that they are, if you combine if I get the ARRI look, I'm okay with lower specifications together with yes in a heartbeat, together we get about 60%. And the other 40% would say, why should I buy a camera that has lower specifications? I think that, I really hope that ARRI actually is looking at this, because at the end of the day, I think there's absolutely a room to consider something like this. Yeah, of course, the smart people at ARRI should, the all business people, they should think it over, but maybe there is a room to do something like this. And of course, some of the comments were very interesting, and people also gave some alternatives, how they do anyway today with a bit of older cameras. So, because some of the older cameras from ARRI can be, you can purchase them, of course, in a lower price. And
yeah, but only used.
Yeah, I'm talking about used camera. Yeah, used cameras. Yeah, so if you're interested, this is always like a mind game a little bit, and it's just interesting to see that people really like the ARRI look. I mean, there is no other way to describe this, and you can see so many times. But also when we get to play with different LUTs, people are trying to imitate that look.
And so, reliability and ease of use of the cameras. I mean, these cameras are, you use them, it's almost like it's almost more important what they left out, kind of like to not confuse people, which is pretty easy to use. Good.
So again, when we talk about some of the things in a year from now, let's see, maybe ARRI kind of listened and decided to take a different, completely opposite of what we talked right now.
Now that our podcast is almost a year old, it's time to look back at 1 year. Maybe it's a new category in the podcast. It's like 1 year ago, and we can start doing this soon, because one of the first episodes last year was the acquisition of RED by Nikon. Right?
Which brings us to the next topic, obviously.
We can move to that topic now, yes. So REDCINE-X Pro, the software, which is kind of like giving you the ability to post-process Red RAW, adds Nikon NRAW support. So that's kind of the first time that we see significant synergy between the companies and the technologies, actually, because so basically what you can do now is open the NRAW, this .nef format that you can generate with some of their Z-line cameras, and do the whole image processing pipeline like you do in Red RAW, now also with the NRAW, which is significant, no?
I think so. I mean, first of all, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe you remember too, because any of the advanced Z line cameras from Nikon can actually record in NRAW, but also in a different type of RAW, like Apple ProRes, for example. Yeah,
RAW internal, really? ProRes RAW internal?
Yeah, from what I remember. I mean, I can 100% we can check this, but it can record both. And one of the reasons they did the NRAW is because Blackmagic Design does not support
ProRes RAW.
ProRes RAW, yeah. So that was another way to cater those who are using DaVinci Resolve, for example. In any case, I think this is a very welcomed development, and this also, of course, opened a whole discussion about what's coming up next.
Well, it's just great. I mean, one of the things that people love about Red RAW is in general just to be able to set the ISO in post. Just change the ISO in post for any recorded stuff. And we talked about this before. You can actually go back and use your old Red 1 footage from 12 years ago and process it with the latest version, and actually get better results because the debayering and everything is just better than it used to be. And now you can do this with NRAW. So you can just set the ISO in post. You can go up to 25,600 ISO. A lot more creative control, of course, that you have. And in general, just better handling of high contrast scenes. Yeah.
So what we did now is actually a Nikon camera that can record in Red RAW. No, that's what's missing.
What's the question? Do you still need Red RAW if you have NRAW now? Because it's in essence it's the same because you can process it.
Maybe you're right.
So maybe they need to. I'm not familiar with NRAW support on all the NLEs, but as long as it's because Red RAW is very well integrated with almost everything, so you can just do this. You can do raw processing for Red RAW in I think most NLEs very easily. If you want to. So I guess if the same is the case for NRAW now too, not just in REDCINE-X Pro, then of course that'd be great. And it's just this pipeline, this image pipeline that people love from Red is now simply also available in the beta for Nikon RAW shooters, RAW video shooters. Yeah. Okay. Good. Let's move on to Angelbird. Now, we mentioned before on the Ursa Cine 12K topic that now with the body-only version, the $7,000 version of the Ursa Cine 12K, there is CFexpress Type B readers built in, so 2 slots actually. And they have a list on their website what is supported in terms of frame rates and resolutions on those cards. Now, Angelbird just came out with new CFexpress Type B version 4 cards that are offering up to 4 terabytes of capacity, and I think even more importantly, up to 3,700 megabytes per second of data rates. So specifically, that means, let me just read that up. It's a sustained.
There is no more. I mean, the minimum is sustained. Yeah, and I just updated in a comment. If you go down, you will see all the specifications. We just got this from Angelbird to clarify some stuff. So in this comment, this is the latest of what we have here.
So the stable stream ensures that sustained performance remains consistent at the same speed. So in this case, the minimum speed would refer to the sustained write speed itself, 512 gigabytes, 1050 megabytes per second, 1 terabyte, 2100 megabytes per second, 2 and 4 terabytes, the new ones, 3,150 megabytes per second. That's significant. Of course, I mean that if supported fully by the Ursa Cine 12K LF, you wouldn't have so many downsides compared to using the media model. I think there still would be. I think it's 4, what did they say, 5 gigabytes per second?
I can't remember by heart, but I'm just saying I would be very careful with comparing apple and oranges here, because obviously the media model, the original one from Blackmagic Design, is really made to sustain very high bit rates and so on.
But I mean, it's great to see that now we have cards that are actually, I mean, they're of course pricey. I mean, if you look at the 4 terabyte model of that card, the AV, I think it's called AV Pro SE CFexpress B version 4, you're looking at $1,200 or euros. But still, I mean, compare that to a couple of years ago, it's amazing. And of course, the bottleneck always used to be with a lot of cameras in terms of what you could record, always used to be the card. And with the CFexpress Type B and A standards, actually now this is gone, right? I mean, that's apart from the reason that, of course, internal RAW recording is still I would say, political issue with a red pattern and so on. But if that is that aside, the limiting factor was often the write speed of a card, and with the new CFexpress cards, this is less and less the case. Simply.
So just wait. Let's wait for the new generations of cameras, which will come very soon, and see if they support the version 4.
By the way, I just want to mention here we have a ongoing cooperation with Angelbird. So if you purchase any of their cards, and most of their readers, but for sure the cards, in each package you get a free 10-day trial of our course platform MZed Pro. So you like full access to all the courses for 10 days for free, and those voucher cards are inside the packaging physically of each of those Angelbird cards. So also the cheaper, smaller ones, but also the new ones. So just so you know. Good. Let's move on to some lens news, some high-end lens news. Tokina announced the Cinema Vista-C Cinema Prime lenses. Vintage-looking optics, but all new coatings. So basically, interesting. We all know how popular the Canon K35s are, or the, what are they called? The Cooke Bancros, Cooke Speed Bancros. And the problem being, of course, there's simply, like a limited availability of those lenses, and they're very old. So they also suffer from, like just wear and tear. And a lot of companies actually have been trying to mimic that look. We've seen the Canon Sumire Primes. We've seen, like even the newer Cooke lenses, the small ones, and some others. But so these Tokina ones are really targeted at achieving a similar look to those K35s or Pancros, but actually have the, benefits of more modern lenses, which is less focus breathing and, like being more sturdily built. And of course, they are not, like these are typical, I would say, rental lenses. We're looking at a price starting per piece at around $10,000. I think it's $10,000 to $12,000, and but it's a completely new line of those high-end primes. Again, I guess that there wasn't a lack of high-end cinema primes in the market. I think interesting timing to come out with these. I'm sure there will be a market for those with some high-end productions, even though it seems quite saturated to me. But the look is nice. You can definitely see in the demo video that they released that, that's has a very pleasing
it's a matter
look.
of taste, I would say, at the end. And it's interesting that they use the same housing and playing with different lens construction in the sense of coating and so on. At least it looks as if people were quite happy to get another version of those Tokina lenses.
Yeah, it's a very organic look, very nice combination of, like sharpness, but still having this kind of vintage look. It's always hard to put in words, of course, but I think people like the new release in general. But of course, question is how big is that market still? For new high-end lenses.
It's also worth mentioning that from the 35mm up, it will actually cover LF, like the Alexa, the new one, the 265. So it's interesting.
That's nice. That's good to know.
Only from 35mm and up. But
so I guess it would also cover the GFX Eterna. Yeah.
The upcoming camera might be,
or the normal GFX 100 too.
So all in all, it can be a very, very versatile tool, especially if you're a rental house and you want to offer this to different clients who are working with different cameras. Yeah.
Good. Let's move on to a new camera. That's actually
exactly the other side of the spectrum.
The completely other side of the spectrum, low-end camera. The Nikon COOLPIX P1100. I didn't even know they still have the COOLPIX brand.
It's a cool name, no? COOLPIX.
Well, it used to be it still is their compact camera line, which of course, thanks to smartphones from all manufacturers, these lines have completely been decimated over the last couple of years. Now, the ones that we have still in the market are very, like far and in between, and they are also very specialized. And I think the one thing that Nikon successfully identified here, which is still something that smartphones don't have, is a huge range of focal lengths.
A physical one, not a digital one or anything.
Of course, real, actual focal lengths. I mean, it's changing also with, like this prism technology that we're seeing. But basically, what they did is release a camera that has a huge zoom range of the equivalent of 24 to 3,000 millimeters. Just imagine having a 3,000 millimeter lens on a full frame, how big that would have to be. Now, of course, that comes with...
Well, it's like a half-inch sensor size, so it's very small, and maybe, we can presume this is not really for low light filming.
It's very slow. It's
it's not. Actually,
it goes to f8.
Yeah, but it's
the long end?
f2.8. It's f2.8 on a wide, which is quite good.
But it's f8 at the long end.
But that's normal with long lenses. That's normally the case. I'm just saying that might be really one of the perfect tools for wildlife filming, and I guess that's what Nikon had in mind. And
it's small actually. It's a 1/2.3 inch type sensor.
Okay.
So yeah,
but
it's
still
not
it's small. It's
yeah. You will have to use this in bright sunshine, basically, if you want to shoot animals at 3,000 millimeters actually. But still, I mean, it's having this ability in this tiny package is of course great if you go on your safari or whatever, and just use this as a fun tool. I would say it's absolutely legit. As for professional production, probably not.
I'm not so sure. I'm actually quite
as a one-off shot. Why not?
To take this with me somewhere, try to produce professional results from something like this. This is the type of camera that we've been asking Panasonic actually with the GH line of cameras, the Micro Four Thirds, to actually do, because this is a perfect combination of sensor size and camera size. But imagine, I mean, it's also not an expensive camera all in all. Yeah. So for $1,100, you get this camera with a huge range of zoom.
Yeah, talking about actually wildlife filming, I think it's a good time to mention we have like 2 or 3 courses on MZed which are only dealing with this subject. And Doug Jensen, who is teaching the wildlife cinematography masterclass, actually has a whole segment where he's talking about, like using the right camera and how he went from this super big camera to an FX6 for wildlife and how that makes sense, of course. And also the challenges with a large sensor shooting wildlife and how the lenses have to become bigger. So this is definitely worth checking out. He's also talking about smaller cameras like this one, like this COOLPIX, for example, and how to use how that also makes sense to use for this one-off shots if you're really, really far away. And of course, we also still have the other course, which is wildlife cinematography, taught by 2 ASC cinematographers that we recorded here in Austria actually a couple of years ago. And we have an adventure filmmaking course with Russ Malkin as well. Who has been, is very experienced in shooting a lot of big content with traveling around the world, kind of shows that you might have seen with some famous actors, I would just say. But you go check it out. Yeah, good. So that sums up the Nikon COOLPIX, and I think it's very inexpensive. It's around $1,000. So
$1,100. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a huge expense. As a special camera, it might be if you shoot wildlife every now and then.
Or the moon. Imagine if you want to do something with your kids. I think it's really great. Maybe to give or work together with them.
I hope it's bright enough though with this.
Yeah, come on. That will not be the obstacle.
Yeah. The other new camera that was announced this week is the OM System OM3, a Micro Four Thirds camera from the successor of Olympus. Tony, what do you think?
First of all, we have to remember that those cameras are extremely popular in Japan. Olympus before and OM in general, this investment company that actually kind of bought the optical, the camera section of Olympus. And it's a bit like, I heard already that is this camera kind of competing the GH7 from Panasonic? I don't think so. First of all, as you can see, it has a retro look. So there's a lot to do with how it looks. And of course, that means that probably it's more combating or joining the competition between the Nikon ZF and even the Fujifilm X106 or one of those cameras. It's somehow there is a retro, we're going back to the retro, and people love this. When it comes to video specifications, so I don't think it's competing in any way with the GH7, not at all, which is really the Lumix GH7 is very much targeting filmmakers. But one thing that we can't take from Olympus, and we haven't touched this one in specific, they always had a very good stabilization system. But when it comes to video, this is a bit lacking. First of all, you can have either 8-bit or 10-bit video, but it's only 4:0 and not even 4:2. And the codecs that it has is H.264 or H.265, and basically that's it. Of course, you can record 4:2 and 10-bit via HDMI output, but when, like I personally really like to work with internal codecs and not have another thing built on my camera and record externally, especially when I'm running and gunning or when I'm traveling. So, yeah, I mean, it's just kind of another camera. So, of course, it can do some nice things. And if you like the look, and maybe for street photography, it's really great. For video, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But price is actually the same as a GH7, right? It's like $2,000.
Yeah, it's like, the price is $2,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all about style.
Good. Moving on to the Atomos Ninja phone. So this is dropped in price by 50% permanently. I mean, Atomos sometimes does these sales where they, like for Ninja 5 or whatever, that is a temporary, but this seems to be permanent. So the Ninja phone, I think, was announced a year ago. I think it was at NAB. I'm not sure, but it's basically it allows your phone to become a monitor for your camera, and also to use your phone as a recorder, a ProRes recorder for the footage from your camera. And the argument behind that is very logical. Phones, especially, I think it's made for iPhones specifically, have very high, they have an Android support now too, I think. But for example, iPhones have very high-end screens, HDR screens, OLED screens, whatever. So you actually have a very, very high resolution quality in these screens, which now can be used as monitors on set, combined with this device, and also as a recorder. I think I'm assuming it's not been as popular as they would hope, because at $400, of course, it wasn't too far away from a Ninja 5 in terms of pricing. And at the end of the day, you would still need to use your phone for other things rather than a recording from your camera. I think it's this typical kind of thing that's nice to have in the bag as an extra thing. But you wouldn't, and me personally, I wouldn't want to use it all the time, because I would simply lose access to my phone when I'm shooting. And you don't want to have a call come in while you're recording,
sure.
I guess.
Again, I don't know how it works. I just know that we talked to Jeremy, I think it was IBC in September last year. There's a very interesting conversation with him about different stuff, but including the Ninja phone. And one of the things that he acknowledged after, we talked a bit, that the name itself, Ninja phone, is already a bit misleading. It's difficult, because that should have been named probably a bit different. And
yeah, it's not a phone. It's like people almost expect like Atomos made a phone.
Kind of, and I think it's not a self-explanatory product. When you see the name, you don't really understand what it does exactly. So you really have to go through some of the videos that they made or others.
And arguably, if you look at what Axon did with the CMO, I think especially on the software side, in general, the CMO line is an amazing. They did a really great job, and I liked even the first version when I did a review of the original CMO, which is kind of the same thing, but it was not thought to be enabling the phone to record. It was really just to do a monitor, but it's much less expensive. And the software is amazing, because you have all the monitoring functions that you need inside the app. Like from the first version, actually already, it was kind of very useful, and they were very fast to react to some feedback that I had even in the review. So I think it's just very hard for Atomos to compete with that. And the question is also, again, how much raw recording do you still need externally, right? In this day and age where you have codecs that are that capable. I think it's more the ability to monitor, sometimes to have the ability to add a monitor on some specific shots when you need it, when you're not happy with the EVF or the internal screen, you just want to see it bigger. The recording functionality is almost like probably not as important, because we all know how painful it is to actually move big files from the phone, like after a shoot. It's like because Apple doesn't have, like support of SD cards or whatever. So it's literally, I mean, now it's become easier with a USB port. Of course, you can just attach an external drive and move it over, but it blocks your phone. You can't use it for other stuff. So it's not ideal, I would say. And I think it's a nice device. It's probably been priced, like you said, I think it's been priced a little too high. I think with this price, it can be successful.
Talking about the price, I'm actually quite surprised that actually the reduced price, the $200, is only in the US.
No, it's not been updated on CVP yet.
Obviously, CVP.
It's mentioned in the article. It's unfortunately they haven't updated the price yet, but it is a global price drop.
Interesting, because that already the news has been out for 5 days, 6 days.
I actually, when I read this, we have to drop CVP an email.
Yeah.
But I think it's a global price drop. Yeah. Anyway, actually, now that we talk about RAW recording, there was a related article, I would say, from Omri, an opinion piece, where he basically talks about asking the question if RAW video has finally gone mainstream. What's your take?
Well, obviously, we can see many more cameras supporting RAW externally for sure. Internally, in some ways or another, that's also coming. I think the question should be a bit more, even if it's mainstream, would I want to work with it? Because RAW recording still has its own limitations, especially if you are on a run and gun situations. And of course, you can manipulate the footage much easier, but on the other hand, you might be risking a little bit of overheating, or what do you do with so much footage? That means you need to double up your cards and your storage devices and so on. So I think it all boils down to use RAW when you really need it. I mean, if your production, if it has a value for your production.
Well, I think it's partly it all comes down to workflow essentially, right? Because we now have ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW, and those are, if you record in those codecs, you essentially often don't end up with much more data than as if you would record a normal ProRes, for example. ProRes RAW, for example, is not heavier than many other versions of ProRes that are
Sure.
much lower.
But for example, if you are the one to edit your footage, does it mean that your laptop or desktop can support the data rate, for example? So it's all a matter of taking into account.
I think if you
stuff.
look at the latest M MacBooks, that's not an issue anymore. It's more like a workflow in a sense that the limitation that is still that, of course, ProRes RAW full support is still only in Final Cut, and it's in general Final Cut is not the mainstream NLE. So it's still, you have to, transcoding is a pain, right? And the same also with Blackmagic RAW, which is really only fully supported in DaVinci. So it's always kind of like the one or the other. And I think that's what makes it difficult. I think we had some interesting comments on this too. Tim Naylor, also a frequent commenter on our side, commented that he used to shoot with a Ninja 5 in ProRes RAW, but that he put it to sleep after a while. That basically, like that, for example, sometimes the Ninja wouldn't take a signal, and then, system failures have a unique sense of timing. And, when things blow up, or that once in a lifetime performance, they don't work. And basically, because of that connection to Final Cut Pro, and the difficulty to transcode, like something you don't want to have if you're not the one, which is in 95% of the cases, you're not the one to actually do the post-processing of your own footage. And that means as soon as you as an operator or shooter need to educate the post-production, you're already in trouble, I would say. As soon as you go out of this. And that's what he says too, that actually that's why they stopped using it, because it's just simply, of course, I think it would be different if we saw raw internal recording with those cameras, and then also have that tied into all the NLEs. Like, for example, if Sony were to finally, because simply with the prevalence of Sony cameras in many productions, like in his case, of course, let's imagine we have the XOCN in all of their lower end cameras too, even if it's a light version of that.
We don't even have a normal RAW, like Apple, like ProRes RAW in any of the lower end Sony cameras.
None
When I say
of them.
lower end, I mean the Alpha. Yeah, I mean, of course, they're really good and great, but nothing. There's not even a USB-C output, like in the sense of you can record externally.
Oh, you can with the recorders. ProRes RAW output is there.
HDMI only, but not.
Yeah. But so basically, and then there's another comment from Thomas Smet on actually how much he's using it, since he has it on the Canon built in. And I think that's a good argument. You have it built into your camera, and Canon RAW is kind of easy to deal with.
That's right.
Of course, it's all about ease of use, I think. And we would like to see full support for either Blackmagic RAW or ProRes RAW in all of the NLEs. I think that would be much easier. But I think in general, I mean, we talked about the Atomos recorders before. We see this trend that people are getting a little bit fatigued of using external recorders, because I think the need for them becomes less and less, right?
I think so too. I mean, and also you would always prefer to work with something which is a bit more reliable and not rely on something which is connected by wire to something.
Yeah.
There's less room for mistakes and failure.
One comment I find very interesting from Trey Reed: yes, it should be mainstream in any camera considered professional. However, I feel like camera operating systems are ridiculously old. They should be modern, able to combine sensor technology with up-to-date AI. As filmmakers and cinematographers, the world will open up. The skill levels will not change, but possibilities will be through the roof. I agree with this. I've talked about this many times before. I feel like even, like better operating systems and menus on cameras are completely out of date if you compare to the latest, like even combine the functions, the HDR images you can get out of the phone, which is basically combining exposures and stuff like this and baking it into the profile, or it's lacking. It's simply lacking. And I think if we are able to get basically better images straight from the camera that are much easier to move from the camera to the cloud, to social media platforms and so on, I think users would only benefit. Yeah. Good. So basically that is the raw topic. We see that I feel like we are a little bit in a transition phase. It's not, I don't think it's mainstream yet. I think because that was basically the question by Omri. I don't think RAW is mainstream. I mean, mainstream for me would mean that you use it every day, and I don't think.
Well, as long as it's patented by somebody, and this somebody is restricting the general use of it, it can't be mainstream, no?
Yeah, but mainstream, I mean, there are more and more cameras. We have Nikon, we have Canon that have internal RAW recording. But I think it's definitely not mainstream, but it's much more attainable. I think what you mentioned before, this bottleneck that we used to have, if you think a long time back to, like even Magic Lantern times from, like the original DSLRs that were shooting video, I think the ability of computers just wasn't there to properly process it. I mean, now you have compressed RAW codecs and computers that are powerful enough to just basically play them back in real time as if they were any other compressed codec. So I don't see this limitation anymore. Right now, it's really just basically, and also the storage limitation is kind of dropping because we have very big cards. We don't have the bottlenecks anymore that we talked about before, that the cards are able to sustain this. And now it's basically just the ability of post-production software to handle all of it, and the cameras to give us the ability to do that. Yeah.
And licensing. I'm back to square one.
Yeah. I'm not left out the politics,
okay.
But yeah, at some point, hopefully, this will drop too. Good. Let's move on to a small piece of news. Rode announced an update to the RØDECaster video, which Felix behind the scenes here reviewed for us actually as part of the podcast once before. We have a review article on that linked from this article as well. Now they added a couple of features which are basically, I mean, they're kind of significant if you want to automate your workflow. For example, there is a function which is called switch to. So basically, you can now define to automatically have it switch to a different media file as soon as one file is over. Now, this sounds basic, but it is important because it will take away a lot of user error. Because at the end of if a media asset would stop playing, you would always have to switch to another one, and now you can basically pre-program this more easily. There's also enhanced routing capabilities. So, for example, it's much easier now to tie this in with video conferencing. For example, if we had an additional guest here, it would be much easier to tie that in now, because you can route specific cameras now directly to USB output also for video conferencing applications and so on, and bypassing the whole program feed. More auto switching things and some other recording enhancements for, different bit rates and so on. What I'm still missing from it, and this is something we've been hoping for from the beginning, and that's the reason why we are not using the RØDECaster video here for the podcast, is it's still missing XML recording or EDL, like edit decision list recording. And that's a problem, because the workflow of the podcast here is basically Felix records everything through a Blackmagic ATEM mini ISO externally to an SSD. It records all the program, like all the ISO streams and program stream, but also it exports a DaVinci project, right? It's a DaVinci project, right? Yeah. And that DaVinci project, he can just open up in DaVinci and just change the cuts. I mean, he is doing the live cuts, but of course, always stuff needs to be corrected in post. Maybe sometimes stuff cut out and so on, but mostly, just change the cuts, and you get a finished file, which is just like a timeline of those cuts, and then you can move around the cuts as you please. Now with the RØDECaster video, that's not possible yet. And you get the individual ISO files, you get a program feed, which is cut based on what you do. So, but you cannot change them easily in post. And that's a problem, of course, because that's something that would, it's quite important for a pre-recorded workflow. It's not important if you do live. Of course, you can't change what's live anyway. And actually, I think it would make sense for us, because right now we use a combination of the Blackmagic ATEM Mini ISO with a RØDECaster Pro 2, simply because the preamps on the RØDECaster and the ability to mix audio is much better, but the setup is more complicated. And the RØDECaster video combines both. I mean, it has the same preamps as a RØDECaster Pro 2. So if they were able to do this, it would kind of eliminate both of those things.
So we need the best usability and flexibility with the best audio, and none of them is actually offering this right now. So
yeah, but I think it's probably something that they're working on. It might not be so easy. They might not be able to give a DaVinci project, but they could be able to do just an XML with an EDL, which can be imported in any NLE and then linked to the media files that you also record. And that would make it very powerful, because the great thing about the RØDECaster video, it has much better processing than all of the other options. And they're basically running everything through software. So we know that they can do this. In theory, it's probably not so easy, because the device is very small, it's very capable. It gets hot, but it's fine. It has all the abilities and more of both of those devices combined, except for that one thing, which is kind of crucial.
Nino, both companies are down under. They're both located in Australia. Imagine if they would just talk to each other and maybe cooperate, because it's not that they're cannibalizing it. In some ways, yes.
They are.
No,
with this, they are.
With this.
But Rode is definitely making inroads into Blackmagic's. Okay. I mean, it makes sense for both of them, of course, because the podcasters, like Rode is probably more established with podcasters who are doing only audio with all the microphones and stuff. But those who want to switch to video would probably more easily buy a Rode product than a Blackmagic product.
It can be interesting and nice to work together. We're all about cooperation, no?
Well, I'll still hope that the update will come at some point, but this is not included with this one. But if you are doing live workflows with media assets and so on, just head over to their website to get that free firmware update. I think it's definitely worth updating. Good. We reported about a free tool that allows you to plan battery consumptions. It's kind of nerdy as our lab tests and our databases. And it's interesting. I know the guy from Facebook, Instagram, Tobias Demel. He's in New York and I think works for a rental company. And this Camera Rentals NYC company made a tool which allows you to basically calculate plan your battery consumption on set. So you can just look at what battery are you using, and then you will be able to define what cameras you're using, what additional monitors, what wireless focus, wireless video, whatever, and how that will affect the kind of the time you can use your battery, how long will you have power, when will you have not enough wattage, and so on.
So this tool is essential when you're using with multiple devices that are connected to the same battery, because that's when you really need it. Otherwise, if just a camera on a battery,
of course. But you want to use it. You want to combine it to one battery.
But that's again sign of modern workflow when you're using one or two batteries to really everything is connected to everything, and you never know where you are with this. So nice.
I think it's very smart because also I think I always lug too many V-mount batteries to my shoots because I usually have big monitors on it and sometimes a wireless video. And then I'm like, having 6 batteries a day will be fine. And it really also depends on the battery and how old it is and all things like that. But
Is this a free tool, by the way?
That's a free tool, entirely free. And you can check it out. We have an article about this, and there's a link to the tool, of course, too. So you can check it out for free. It's not an app. So you have to go to a website to enter all the data. But very cool idea. Good. Let's move on to our last 3 pieces of, it's not news, but interviews, actually.
That's right.
So our dear friend Graham Sheldon in LA did a couple of interviews on different subjects recently, longer form interviews. One of them is an interview with Richard Jones, the founder of the NGO Safety for Sarah, which is dealing with prioritizing safety on set. Now, you might know and remember Sarah Jones, who was tragically killed 10 years ago on set of a feature film. I think
in the train.
She was on train tracks, and basically she was a PA, or I think she's a PA or a camera assistant. I think PA. And basically
second camera assistant.
Second camera assistant. And there was a lot of solidarity with basically what happened afterwards is there's a big shock in the industry that this basically happened because safety was not the main concern on the shoot, and it could have been absolutely prevented. And her father and mother started, actually, because they got so much feedback, they started an initiative to really focus on safety on set and how to enhance it. And it became a non-profit, and they basically are supporting a lot of people and schools, educating about the subject and really giving guidelines on how to deal with safety on set and enhance it without risking any lives. And there has been a lot of solidarity with Sarah over the years. Basically, up until today, it's kind of a tradition on many sets, which is very nice to have her name on the slates of a lot of movies. Here we see Dustin Hoffman holding a slate for a movie that he was in, which says a RIP Sarah Jones on it. Rest in peace, Sarah Jones. And there's a lot of others in memory of Sarah Jones. So it's very, very nice to keep her memory alive. And just really also learn something from this in order to, make sets safer. We've all been on sets where we know that safety was not the main concern.
It's this 1 second that you cannot reverse back.
Exactly.
So
there's a lot of things that are more important than getting the best shot, and the main thing is just to keep everybody alive, basically, and safe. And this is something that's unfortunately in the past has been neglected very often. I mean, if you're shooting we all shooting in dangerous places sometimes, and the dangerous place might just be a street. Like you have a street scene.
Home is the most dangerous place, no?
But you know how it works on shoots. So go check that out. That interview. They're talking about a lot of different subjects. They also touching on, in general, safety on set. They also talk about Helena Hutchins, and who was also tragically killed on set of Rust, and a lot of other topics. This is a very, very good interview that Graham did with Richard Jones, the father of Sarah and founder of Safety for Sarah. Moving on to another interview he did, which is about a subject which, is certainly underrepresented in the media, is basically representing disability and specifically stuttering in entertainment. And it's an interview with Marc Winski, who's on HBO Max's The Penguin. Now, a lot of you might remember the movie The King's Speech, which is about what was the name of the king, actually? I'm sorry, I'm not so good in English royalty. But anyway, so the British king that had a severe stutter.
One of the Georges, I guess. No, it's always George.
It's
always like in Austria, it's Franz Josef, and I guess in England it's George.
It's very embarrassing not to know this. But anyway, it's So, but this movie was really about stuttering, and this is actually mentioned as one of the few very good examples of where an actor was given the proper training of representing stutter accurately in a movie. But there's a lot of other examples where it's simply not accurately represented and the way it's depicted, because it's usually not the main subject of a movie. And this whole interview deals with the fact that, how important it is to represent disability properly, because usually, of course, the actor portraying it is not disabled and has a big responsibility on doing this. And it might not be the main thing that's on the director's mind when they are shooting, right? But it's actually, inclusion is important, and it's very important to represent people correctly. And he's talking about that process, which is, of course, not easy, and very, very interesting insights in that interview. So head over to that article to learn about this. Very nice to get some subjects actually that are not about the latest gear. It's such
because in so many times that's what really counts in life. We are really dealing with hardware sometimes, and it's like, okay, they come and they go. We love it. We are all nerds, but of course, some of the stuff is simply more important.
Yeah. Last topic for today is a nice article that our dear writer Masha wrote about, educational article on harmony and tension in symmetrical shots with a lot of movie and TV examples. Now, of course, when you think about harmony in film and symmetry specifically, you can't ignore Wes Anderson movies. So, of course, she also dives into that and his typical setups in, basically every Wes Anderson movie. Here's the trailer of Grand Budapest Hotel, an amazing movie. So the meaning of symmetry and how it helps harmony and what it means and how you actually can use it to build disharmony as well. So it's very, very good to check it out, and how to, you can really learn on how you can use this balance and imbalance to influence the content of your shots and really use it as a shooter as well in your productions. And a lot of very good and very famous examples from recent or also more historical films, and also from our MZed course, Fundamentals of Directing, that really digs into this subject as well. That's a relatively small course that is about 2 hours long, and you can get it as part of the MZed Pro subscription, which is available monthly for $49. Deals with this quite a lot as well. Good. Shall we wrap it up here?
We can. I mean, it was a long episode, I think.
Let's see. Well, Felix is nodding, so I guess so. Yeah. Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Nino.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Hear you next week on our 52nd episode. So we have the year full next year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. And don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you can get podcasts. Leave us a good rating. Send us a comment to podcast@cined.com or just comment on a YouTube video. As you know, now we're actually going through those comments. See you next week.
Bye.